In May of last year, The Economist put a Vietnamese politician on its cover. Not a celebrity, not a tech billionaire, a former police chief. The cover hailed him as a pragmatic reformist, a man with, quote, a plan for Vietnam. Within days of hitting newsstands, the issue was banned inside the country. That tension, between a reformist image abroad and an authoritarian reality at home, is exactly what this video is about. To understand the moment Vietnam is in, you need to understand the man at the center of it. Tô Lâm spent decades climbing through the ranks of Vietnam's Ministry of Public Security, the MPS. Think of it as the FBI, Homeland Security, and the National Police, all fused into one institution. For years, he was the country's top cop. And like many men who reach the summit of a security apparatus, he became extraordinarily powerful, not just in law enforcement, but in politics. His predecessor, Nguyen Phu Trong, was a different kind of leader entirely. Trong was an ideological purist who spent his career defending communist orthodoxy and launched Vietnam's most aggressive anti-corruption campaign in modern history, a sweeping purge called Jot Luo, meaning blazing furnace, that sent dozens of senior officials to prison. But Trong's health declined sharply in his final years. When he passed away in July 2024, Tô Lâm stepped into the vacuum, and he moved fast. Unlike Trong, Lam doesn't quote Marx. He talks about GDP targets, tech investment, and Vietnam's standing in the global economy. He has publicly called out Vietnam's underfunded healthcare and its lagging research spending, things an ideologue might have glossed over. The Economist wasn't wrong to notice him. He does look different from the old guard, but looks can be deeply deceiving. Let's give credit where it's due. Under Tô Lâm, Vietnam has pursued some genuinely ambitious reforms. He pushed for the merger of bloated government ministries, cutting bureaucratic overlap that had slowed Vietnam's administration for years. He has spoken openly about moving the country up the value chain, away from cheap assembly work and toward tech-driven development. And he has set a goal of double-digit GDP growth, signaling that he understands the economic ambitions of a young and aspirational population. Geopolitically, he has had to be nimble. Vietnam sits in one of the most complex neighborhoods on Earth, squeezed between an assertive China, an increasingly transactional United States, and competing powers across the South China Sea. Lam has navigated all of this while projecting calm confidence. But here's the question you have to ask. Who actually benefits from Vietnam's growth under Tô Lâm? Because beneath the economic rhetoric, a very specific institution has been accumulating power at a remarkable pace. The Ministry of Public Security, Tô Lâm old home, has, since his rise to General Secretary, been on an extraordinary power grab. This is not a subtle bureaucratic shift. This is the police inserting themselves into land use, taxation, foreign investment, private business inspections, personal data, and telecommunications. In March of this year, the MPS proposed a new decree granting police the authority to evaluate, approve, or outright block development projects, all in the name of national security. Traditionally, land use planning was handled by civilian agencies. You want to build a factory, you go through planning authorities, environmental review, ministry approval. Under this new framework, the police get a veto. Critics warn this could be devastating for foreign investment. When a foreign company evaluates Vietnam for a new facility, regulatory predictability is everything. They need to know that the rules will stay the same. The moment you give a security ministry the undefined power to label any project a national security risk, that predictability evaporates. And that lack of definition is not a loophole. In authoritarian systems, it is a feature. Vague laws are tools of selective enforcement. They let the powerful decide, case by case, who succeeds and who gets shut down. Critics have a name for where that road leads: crony capitalism. It goes further than large infrastructure projects. In 2026, Vietnam's provincial and communal police were handed a new mandate: inspecting private business SSEs and small household enterprises for regulatory compliance. Family-run shops, small restaurants, local service businesses, the backbone of Vietnam's informal economy. The policy is deliberately vague about which businesses get targeted. It prioritizes sectors with potential risks to public order. That phrase is never defined. Investigative reporting found that informal bribes, paid to avoid trouble with inspectors, were already common before this policy existed. One police officer, speaking anonymously, admitted these fees serve as a major supplement to his official salary. This is not a corruption problem the new policy creates from scratch. It is an existing corruption ecosystem that the new policy pours gasoline on. Now for something more personal, your data. By 2025, the Ministry of Public Security had become a major shareholder in two of Vietnam's largest telecommunications companies, Mobifone and FPT Telecom. Cybersecurity police are now embedded at the center of the country's digital infrastructure. Every text message, every phone call, every data packet flowing through those networks. The security apparatus now has an ownership stake in the companies carrying that traffic. And then there is the surveillance camera policy. A government decision issued this year authorizes the integration of private surveillance cameras into communal police databases. Footage from cameras on private homes, shops, and apartment buildings can now be stored at police centers or government-licensed cloud services. The decision does not say whether citizens can opt out. Vietnam is not the first country to build a mass surveillance infrastructure, but the speed at which this one is being assembled and the near total absence of public debate is striking. Taken together, what you are watching is the construction of what analysts are beginning to call a super ministry. The MPS now has its fingerprints on telecommunications, the judiciary, cybersecurity, the film industry, driver licensing, stock market oversight, social housing, logistics, and even airport construction, including the new international Gia Binh Airport in Bac Ninh province, set to open in 2027. This is not a police ministry. This is an alternative government, and the consolidation is personal too. Since becoming General Secretary, Tô Lâm has installed loyalists from his home province of Hưng Yên across the state. Long Tam Quang now leads the MPS. Nguyen Duy Ngoc was elevated to the Politburo. And Tô Lâm own son, Tu Long, now heads the Department of External Security. In political science, this is called patronage consolidation, building a network of loyal officials who owe their positions to you and who therefore have every incentive to protect your power. So what does all of this add up to? When security ministries become economic gatekeepers, you don't just get political repression. You get a distorted economy. Investment flows toward political connections rather than productivity. Businesses that pay the right people survive. Those that don't. And once that logic is embedded in a system, once the veto over investment is normalized, the inspection regime entrenched, the surveillance infrastructure built, it becomes very hard to reverse. Vietnam's population has a median age of around 30. They are connected, ambitious, and watching. The question is not whether Vietnam will grow. The economic fundamentals are strong enough that it probably will. The real question is who controls that growth, who captures its benefits, and at what cost. The Economist put Tô Lâm on its cover because they saw a man who seemed to understand that Vietnam needed to change to survive. That instinct was not entirely wrong. But change in politics is never neutral. It always empowers someone and constrains someone else. Right now, the Ministry of Public Security is being empowered. The question of who is being constrained, businesses, investors, ordinary citizens, is one Vietnam will be living with for years to come. The magazine was banned inside the country. Maybe the regime understood the image better than anyone, because a man wearing star-shaped glasses doesn't just see clearly. He decides what everyone else is allowed to see.